Welcome back. We're on chapter 10. Quick now, come find me. Moundshroud's voice laughing called them on. This way, no, this. They ran along the slender ribbon of mummy wrapping deep into the earth. Yes, here I am. They turned a corner and stopped, for the long linen ribbon wound across the tomb floor and up a wall to wrap around the feet of an ancient brown mummy, which was propped atilt in a candlelit niche. Stuttered Ralph Bingtrom, dressed in his own mummy costume. Is that a real mummy? Yes. Dust sifted from under the golden mask on the mummy's face. Real. Mr. Moundshroud, you. The gold mask fell to clang like a bright bell on the floor. Where the mask had been was a mummy's face, a pool of brown mud crinkled by blasts of sun. One eye was glued shut with spiderweb, the other eye cracked forth tears of dust and a glint of bright blue glass. Is there some boy here dressed like a mummy? Asked the muffled voice beneath their shroud. Why, me, sir, squeaked Ralph, showing his arms, legs, chest, the medical bandage it had taken him all afternoon to wrap himself up in, mummified. Good, sighed Moundshroud. Grab the linen strip. Pull. Ralph bent, took hold of the ancient mummy bandages, and yanked. The ribbon unraveled, up around, up around, up around, to reveal the great ancient reptile nosebeak and flaky chin and dry, smiling, dust-powdery mouth of Moundshroud. His crossed arms fell loose. Thanks, lad. Free. No fun being wrapped like some old funeral gift for the land of the dead. But hist, quick boys. Hop in the niches. Stand stiff. Someone's coming. Play mummies, boys. Play dead. The boys leaped to stand. Arms folded. Eyes shut. Breaths held like a frieze of small mummies, cut in the ancient rock. Whispered Moundshroud. Here comes a funeral procession. An army of mourners in gold and fine silks, bearing small sailing ship toys and copper bowls of food in their hands. In their midst, a mummy case carried light as sunshine on the shoulders of 6 men, and behind that, a fresh-wrapped mummy with new paintings on its linen vestments and a small gold mask fitted over the hidden face. See the food, boys. The toys, whispered Moundshroud. They put toys in the tombs, lad, so the gods will come play, romp, roust about, and run children happy to the land of the dead. See the boats, kites, jump ropes, toy knives. But look at the size of that mummy, said Ralph, inside his hot linen bandages. It's a 12-year-old boy in there. Like me, and that gold mask on the boy mummy's face. Doesn't it look familiar? Pipkin, cried everyone hoarsely. Shh, hissed Moundshroud, for the funeral had stopped. The high priests were glancing around through the flickering torch shadows. The boys, high in their niches, squeezed their eyes tight, sucked in their breaths. Not a whisper, said Moundshroud, a mosquito in Tom's ear. Not a murmur. The harp music began again. The funeral shuffled on, and in the midst of all the gold and toys, the kites of the dead, there was a small 12-year-old, fresh new mummy, with a gold mask that looked exactly like Pipkin. No, 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 thought Tom. Yes, cried a mouse voice. Tiny, lost, wrapped away, kept, trapped, wild. It's me. I'm here, under the mask, under the wrappings. Can't move, can't yell, can't fight free. Pipkin, thought Tom. Wait, can't help it. Trapped, shouted the small wee voice wrapped in linens. Follow, meet me, find me at... The voice faded, for the funeral procession had turned a corner in the dark labyrinth and was gone. "Follow you where, Pipkin?" Tom Skelton jumped down from his niche and yelled into the dark. "Meet you where?" But at that exact moment, Moundshroud, like a chopped tree, fell out of his niche. Bang! He struck the floor. "Wait," he cautioned Tom, looking up at him with one eye that looked like a spider caught in its own web. "We'll save old Pipkin yet. Sly does it. Slide and creep, boys." They helped him up and unwound some of his mummy wrappings and tiptoed down the long corridor and turned the corner. "Holy cow," whispered Tom. "Look, they're putting Pipkin's mummy in the coffin, and the coffin inside the sarcophagus." Moundshroud supplied the jaw cracker. "A coffin in a coffin in a coffin, lad, each larger than the last, all done up in hieroglyphs to tell his life story." "Pipkin's life?" said all, or whoever Pipkin was this time around, this year, 4,000 years ago. "Yeah," whispered Ralph. "Look at the pictures on the sides of the coffin. Pipkin 1 year old, Pipkin 5, Pipkin 10 and running fast, Pipkin up an apple tree, Pipkin pretending to drown in the lake, Pipkin eating his way through a peach orchard." "Wait, what's that?" Moundshroud watched the busy funeral. "They're putting furniture in the tomb for him to use in the land of the dead. Boats, kites, tops to spin, fresh fruits, should Pipkin wake 100 years from now hungry. He'll be hungry all right. Good grief, look. They're all going out. They're closing the tomb." Moundshroud had to grab and hold Tom, for he was jumping up and down in agony. "Pipkin's still in there, buried. When do we save him?" "Later. The long night is young. We'll see Pipkin again, never fear." Then the tomb door slammed shut. The boys yammered and yelled. In the dark, they could hear the scrape and slosh of mortar filling the last cracks and seams as the final stones were shoved in place. The mourners went away with their silent harps. Ralph stood in his mummy costume, stunned, watching the last shadows go. "Is that why I'm dressed like a mummy?" He fingered the bandages. He touched his clay-wrinkled ancient face. "Is that what my Halloween is all about?" "All, boy, all," murmured Moundshroud. "The Egyptians, why, they built to last. 10,000 years they planned for. Tombs, boys, tombs. Graves, mummies, bones. Death, death. Death was at the very heart. Gizzard, light, soul, and body of their life. Tombs and more tombs with secret passages so none might be found, so grave robbers could not borrow souls and toys and gold. You are a mummy, boy, because that is how they dressed for eternity, spun up in cocoons of threads. They hoped to come forth like lovely butterflies in some dear, loving world. Know your cocoon, boy. Touch the strange stuffs." "Why," said Ralph the mummy, blinking at the smoky walls and old hieroglyphs, "every day was Halloween to them." "Every day," gasped all in admiration. "Every day was Halloween for them, too," Moundshroud pointed. The boys turned. A kind of green electric storm simmered in the tomb dungeon. The ground shuddered as with an ancient earthquake. Somewhere a volcano turned over in its sleep, lighting the walls with one fiery shoulder. And on the walls beyond were prehistoric drawings of cavemen long before the Egyptians. "Now," said Moundshroud. Lightning struck. Saber-toothed tigers caught the cavemen screaming. Tar pits drowned their bones. They sank, wailing. "Wait, let's save a few with fire." Moundshroud blinked. Lightning struck to burn forests. One ape-man running seized a burning branch and rammed it in a saber-tooth's jaws. The tiger shrieked and fell away. The ape-man, snorting in triumph, tossed the fiery branch into a pile of autumn leaves in his cave. Other men came to hold their hands out to the fire, laughing at the night where the yellow beast's eyes waited. Afraid. "See, boys," Moundshroud's face flickered with fire. "The days of the long cold are done. Because of this one brave, new-thinking man, summer lives in the winter cave." "But," said Tom, "what's that got to do with Halloween?" "Do? Why, blast my bones, everything. When you and your friends die every day, there's no time to think of death, is there? Only time to run. But when you stop running at long last, he touched the walls. The ape-men froze in mid-flight. Now you have time to think of where you came from, where you're going. And fire lights the way, boys. Fire and lightning. Morning stars to gaze at. Fire in your own cave to protect you. Only by night fires was the caveman, beast man, able to turn his thoughts on a spit and base them with wonder. The sun died in the sky. Winter came on like a great white beast shaking its fur, burying him. Would spring ever come back to the world? Would the sun be reborn next year or stay murdered? Egyptians asked it. Cavemen asked it 1,000,000 years before. Will the sun rise tomorrow morning? And that's how Halloween began? With such long thoughts at night, boys. And always at the center of it, fire, the sun dying down the cold sky forever. How that must have scared early man, eh? That was the big death. If the sun went away forever, then what? So, in the middle of autumn, everything dying, ape-men turned in their sleep, remembered their own dead of the last year. Ghosts called in their heads. Memories, that's what ghosts are, but ape-men didn't know that. Behind their eyelids, late nights, the memory ghosts called, waved, danced. So ape-men woke up, tossed twigs on the fire, shivered, wept. They could drive away wolves, but not memories, not ghosts. So they held tight to their ribs, prayed for spring, watched the fire, thanked invisible gods for harvest of fruit and nuts. Halloween indeed, 1,000,000 years ago, in a cave in autumn, with ghosts inside heads and the sun lost. Moundshroud's voice faded. He unraveled another yard or two of mummy wrappings, draped them over his arm grandly, and said, "More to see. Come on, boys." And they walked out of the catacombs into the twilight of an old Egyptian day. A great pyramid lay before them waiting. "Last one to the top," said Moundshroud, "is a monkey's uncle." And the monkey's uncle was Tom. Gasping, they reached the pyramid's top, where waited a vast crystal lens, a viewing glass which spun slowly on the wind, on a golden tripod, a gigantic eye with which to bring far places near. In the west, the sun, smothered and dying in clouds, sank. Moundshroud hooted his delight. "There it goes, boys, the heart, soul, and flesh of Halloween, the sun. There Osiris is murdered again. There sinks Mithras, the Persian fire. And there falls Phoebus Apollo, all Grecian light. Sun and flame, boys, look and blink. Turn that crystal spyglass, swing it down the Mediterranean coast 1,000 miles. See the Greek Isles?" "Sure," said plain George Smith, dressed up as a fancy pale ghost. Cities, towns, streets, houses, people jumping out on the porches to bring food. "Yes," Moundshroud beamed, "their festival of the dead. The Feast of Pots, trick-or-treat old style, but tricks from the dead if you don't feed them. So treats are laid out in a fine banquet on the sill. Far away in the sweet dusk, smells of cooked meats steamed, dishes were dealt out for spirits, and smoked across the land of the living. The women and children of the Grecian homes came and went with multitudinous quantities of spiced and delectable victuals. Then, all through the Grecian Isles, doors slammed. The vast slamming echoed along the dark wind. "The temples shutting tight," said Moundshroud. "Every holy place in Greece will be double-locked this night. And look," Ralph, who was a mummy, swung the crystal lens. The light flared over the boys' masks. "Those people, why, they're painting black molasses on their front doorposts." "Pitch," corrected Moundshroud. "Black tar to glue the ghosts. Stick them fast so they can't get inside." "Why," said Tom, "didn't we think of that?" Darkness moved down the Mediterranean shores. From the tombs, like mist, the dead spirits wavered in soot and black plumes along the streets to be caught in the dark tar that smeared the porch sills. The wind mourned, as if telling the anguish of the trapped dead. Now Italy, Rome. Moundshroud turned the lens to see Roman cemeteries where people placed food on graves and hurried off. The wind whipped Moundshroud's cape. It hollowed his mouth. "Oh, autumn winds that bake and burn, and all the world to darkness turn. Now storm and seize and make of me a swarm of leaves from autumn's tree." He kick-jumped straight up into the air. The boys yelled delight, even as his clothes, cape, hair, skin, body, corn candy bones tore apart before their eyes. Leaves burn, change, turn. The wind ribboned him to confetti. 1,000,000 autumn leaves, gold, brown, red as blood, rust, all wild, rustling, shimmering. A clutch of oak and maple leaf, a hickory leaf downfall, a toss of flaking whisper, murmur, rustle to the dark River Creek sky. Not one kite, but 10,000 tiny mummy flake kites. Mound shroud exploded apart. World turn, leaves burn, grass die, trees fly. And from a billion other trees in autumn lands, leaves rushed to join with the upflung battalions of dry bits that were Mound shroud dispersed in whirlwinds from which his voice stormed. Boys, see the fire along the Mediterranean coast. Fires burning north from Europe. Fires of fear. Flames of celebration. Would you spy, boys? Up now. Fly. And the leaves in avalanche fell upon each boy like terrible flapping moths and carried them away. Over Egyptian sands they sang and laughed and giggled. Over the strange sea, rapturous and hysterical, they soared. Happy New Year, a voice cried far below. Happy what? Asked Tom. Happy New Year, Mound shroud. A flock of rusty leaves rustled his voice. In old times, the 1st of November was New Year's Day, the true end of summer, the cold start of winter. Not exactly happy, but, well, Happy New Year. They crossed Europe and saw new water below. The British Isles, whispered Mound shroud. Would you cock an eye at England's own druid god of the dead? We would. Quiet as milkweed then, soft as snow, fall. Blow away down, each and all. The boys fell like a bushel of chestnuts. Their feet rained to earth. Now the boys who landed like a downpour of bright autumn trash were in this order. Tom Skelton, dressed up in his delicious bones. Henry Hank, more or less a witch. Ralph Bingstrom, an unraveled mummy, becoming more unbandaged by the minute. A ghost named George Smith. J.J., no other name needed. A very fine ape-man. Wally Bob, who said he was a gargoyle, but everyone said he looked more like Quasimodo. Fred Fryer, what else but a beggar fresh out of a ditch. And last, and not least, Hackles Nibley, who had run up a costume at the very last moment by simply clapping on a white scare mask and grabbing his grandpa's harvest scythe off the garage wall. All the boys being safely landed on English earth, their brilliant autumn leaves fell off and blew away. They stood in the midst of a vast field of wheat. Here, Master Nibley, I brought your scythe. Take it, grab. Now lie low, warned Mound shroud. The druid god of the dead, Samhain, fall. They fell, for a huge scythe came skimming down out of the sky. With its great razor edge it cut the wind. With its whistling side it sliced clouds. It beheaded trees. It razored along the cheek of the hill. It made a clean shave of wheat. In the air a whole blizzard of wheat fell. And on every whisk, every cut, every scythe, the sky was aswarm with cries and shrieks and screams. The scythe hissed up. The boys cowered. Ugh, grunted a large voice. Mr. Mound shroud, is that you? Cried Tom, for towering 40 feet above them in the sky, an immense scythe in his hand, was this cowled figure, its face in midnight fogs. The blade swung down. Hiss. Mr. Mound shroud, let us be. Shut up. Someone knocked Tom's elbow. Mr. Mound shroud lay on the earth beside him. That's not me. That's Samhain, cried the voice in the fog. God of the dead, I harvest thus and so. Shh. All those who died this year are here, and for their sins this night are turned to beasts. Please, whimpered Ralph the mummy. The scythe zippered Hackles Nippy's spine, ripping his costume in a long tear, knocking his own small scythe free of his hands. Beasts! And the harvest wheat flailed up, spun around the wind, shrieking its souls. All those who had died in the past 12 months rained to earth, and falling, touching, the heads of wheat were turned to asses, chickens, snakes, which scurried, cackled, brayed, were turned to dogs and cats and cows that barked, cried, bawled. But they were all miniature. All were tiny, small, no bigger than worms, no bigger than toads, no bigger than the sliced-off tip of a nose. By the hundreds and thousands, the wheat heads snowed up in scatters and fell down as spiders, which could not shout or beg or weep for mercy, but which, soundless, raced over the grass, poured over the boys. 100 centipedes tiptoed on Ralph's spine. 200 leeches clung to Hackle's nibbly scythe until the nightmare gasp he raved and shook them off. Everywhere fell black widows and tiny boa constrictors. For your sins, take that, and this, bellowed the voice in the whistling sky. The scythe flashed. The wind cut, fell in bright thunders. The wheat churned and gave up 1,000,000 heads. Heads fell, sinners hit like rocks, and hitting were turned into frogs and toads, and multitudes of scaly warts, and legs, and jellyfish which stank in the light. "I'll be good," prayed Tom Skelton. "Let me live," added Henry Hank. All of this said very loudly, for the scythe was making a dreadful roar. It was like an ocean wave falling down out of the sky, cleaning a beach and running away up to cut more clouds. Even the clouds seemed to be whispering out swift, more fervent prayers for their own fates. "Not me, not me." "For all the evil you ever did," said Samhain, and the scythe cut, and the souls were harvested and fell in blind newts and awful bedbugs and dreadful cockroaches to scuttle, limp, creep, scrabble. "My gosh, he's a bug maker, flea squasher, snake grinder outer, roach transformer, fly keeper. No, Samhain, October god, god of the dead." Samhain stomped a great foot, which tread 1,000 bugs in the grass, trampled 10,000 tiny soul beasts in the dust. "I think," said Tom, "it's time we—" "Ran?" suggested Ralph, not offhand. "Shall we take a vote?" The scythe hissed. Samhain boomed. "Vote heck," said Moundshroud. All jumped up. "You there," thundered the voice above them. "Come back." "No, sir, thanks," said one, and then another, and put right foot after left. "I figure," said Ralph, panting, leaping, tears in his cheeks. "I've been pretty good most of my life. I don't deserve to die." "Ha ha," shouted Samhain. The scythe came a guillotine, which chunked the heads off an oak tree and felled a maple. A whole orchard of autumn apples fell into a marble pit somewhere. It sounded like a house full of boys falling downstairs. "I don't think he heard you, Ralph," said Tom. They dived. They fell among rocks and shrubs. The scythe ricocheted off the stones. Samhain gave such a yell as brought an avalanche down a small hill nearby. "Boy," said Ralph, squinched up, balled up, feet against chest, eyes tight. "England is no place to be a sinner." Even as a final rain, a shower, a downpour of hysterical souls turned beetle, turned flea, turned stink bug, turned daddy longlegs, scurried over the boys. "Hey, look, that dog." A wild dog, mad with terror, raced up the rocks, and its face, its eyes, something in its eyes. "That couldn't be Pipkin," said everyone. "Pip," shouted Tom. "Is this where we meet you? But, whoom." The scythe fell, and yipping with fright, the dog bowled over, slid down the grass. "Hold on, Pipkin. We know you. We see you. Don't scare off. Don't—" Tom whistled, but the dog, yarping with Pipkin's own dear sweet scared voice, was gone. But didn't an echo of his yip come back to the hills? "Meet, meet, meet, meet." "Where?" thought Tom criminally. "Where?"